Mark my words when I say that Ziggy is going to be revealed as Shiki. Pretty harebrained theory, I know, but just stick with me and it'll all start to make sense. Now, I probably speak for a lot of fans when I say that part of my interest in Eden Zero lately has been figuring out what this guy's deal is. Between what we already know and what people have been theorizing, Ziggy is building up not only to be the best villain in Eden Zero, but ultimately one of the most important characters throughout its many parallel timelines. But before we start looking at any fan theories and making any decisions, let's look at what we know. Because with Ziggy being all dark and mysterious, a lot of this stuff is hard to keep straight even though it's all important. First off, one thing we should keep in mind is that Ziggy met Xenolith about 100 years ago. Unfortunately, we didn't get anything else cause screw us, I guess. But that at least tells us one thing. We can say with confidence that Ziggy wasn't always evil. Xenolith can pretty much read people's hearts, what with him being Robot Yoda and all, so the odds of him teaching his ether gear to someone this full of hatred are pretty slim. Now, in the same chapter, we hear what is allegedly Ziggy's side of the story concerning why he searched for Mother. It's not clear exactly what he meant, but here's what he tells the Dark Stars. Ziggy lost his memories before he suddenly became aware of it while building Granbell. As a result, this prompted Ziggy to find Mother and regain his memories. In that time, he visited Nadia from Red Cave and Xenolith 18 years ago without the Shining Stars. Eventually, he meets Shiki, senses value in him greater than his memories, and decides to go home and raise him. So while this story is pretty vague, it at least confirms that Ziggy still wasn't the villain we know him as during this time. But after that point when he dies is where we can see what is likely the biggest clue. Ziggy tells the Dark Stars that he doesn't know how or why he was revived with his old memories. And when Elsie finds his body on Granbell, she claims that she felt an ether that wasn't from the Ziggy she knew. So while this is still pretty vague, it at least gives us one crucial fact. Some force beyond Ziggy's control or knowledge revived Ziggy's dead body, and restored his memories from at least 100 years ago. Because if Ziggy with his full memories restored has no idea how it happened, then it's probably not something he planned himself. And if Ziggy didn't do it, then it's someone or something beyond his power. And that's where we can start to look at fan theories and reason that there's probably some time travel at play. But as I invite you to share your theories on Ziggy, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Party Jams for their comment of the week from my last video on Justice. If you'd like me to share your comment in the next video, then make sure to drop your theory on Ziggy down below. Now, like I was saying, this bit about Ziggy being revived is an important tool for sorting through the many fan theories. Actually, while there's tons of theories out there, it's really 3 in particular that people seem to be gravitating towards. The first, and probably oldest, is the theory that Ziggy was somehow infected by a virus. This was the one I found myself supporting in the beginning, but now it seems like the least likely explanation. I don't want to completely shoot it down though, so let me point out how this is still possible. The obvious clue is that Ziggy used to be a good guy, but then when he was revived, he seemed as if he had been corrupted. So a virus manipulating Ziggy's programming could explain why he has this evil personality, as well as why he has these gaps in his memories and why he doesn't know how he was revived. But now let me explain why this probably isn't the explanation. Admittedly, a virus could have manipulated Ziggy's memories, meaning we, the readers, have a fake backstory for Ziggy. But even assuming that's the case, that still leaves 2 questions unanswered. First of all, how would the virus be able to revive Ziggy? We know that once an android's core is damaged, or they lose all their energy, that this is their equivalent of dying. Unless you have all of their data before they died, that android cannot be brought back as they once were. So if someone or something recreated Ziggy, they would need access to all of his past memories. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the memories, programming, or abilities that he currently possesses. Which brings us to the second question of who or what infected Ziggy with this virus. There's only one explanation I can think of, but we'll get to that later in the video. For now, there are just too many unknowns as far as someone other than Ziggy obtaining all his past data and or being able to bring him back to life. So while you shouldn't count it out just yet, I wouldn't hold my breath for this one either. But with that out of the way, let's look at the second theory. This theory essentially says that Ziggy is from another universe. Now, this one is obviously open to interpretation, but the implication would be that Ziggy existed in some other timeline, separate from the timeline we've been following since Chapter 1. Now, this one definitely has some merit to it, seeing as how time travel is such a crucial element of the story. Plus, Ziggy has some ambiguities in his story, and we've seen from Rebecca that time travel tends to be the cause of these kinds of anomalies. So, at least in theory, Ziggy being from another timeline would explain a lot. But see, we have to be mindful when we're using the word timeline. As of Noah's most recent explanation, there seems to be two kinds of time travel. There's one in which it's so insignificant that even though it creates a new world, the greater future isn't changed. Then there's universes which exist as parallel timelines. These are timelines that can clearly be distinguished based on certain crucial moments. So when we say Ziggy is from another timeline, the idea is that he somehow traveled from another parallel universe into the one we started in. But hopefully you can see that this doesn't entirely explain our problem. Remember, we know Ziggy met Xenolith almost 100 years ago, so there's a crucial question of when Ziggy would have made the trip. And that's another thing. I say our timeline, but the timeline we started in is not the one we're in right now. So, for example, let's say Ziggy made the trip while we were in Universe 2, which would be when he was revived. That still doesn't explain why he is aware of his past self. Whenever Rebecca leaps from one universe to another, nobody except for someone like Noah seems to be aware of it. Whenever the Eden Zero has run into a new version of Captain Connor, Rebecca has been the only one to remember the last time they met. And of course, the obvious flaw in this theory is how Ziggy would travel from one universe to another but not then remember how he did it. So Ziggy somehow traveling between timelines doesn't account for him having all of his memories from the past, or for how he claims to be aware of the worlds concept that Noah introduced. But while it doesn't give us a complete answer, this theory isn't completely off the mark. In fact, it actually points us right in the direction of the third theory. This is one that I've seen gain popularity more recently, and while I mostly agree with it, I'm just going to do a little tweaking. This theory basically says that Ziggy is somehow Shiki from another timeline. Again, there's a bunch of similar theories like this one out there, so it's most definitely the case that I'm not the first one to put this out. But regardless, here is my current theory. My current theory is that Ziggy is an incarnation of Shiki from a past world before Mother granted a wish. Now, let me explain what I mean by incarnation. We know that Ziggy claims to know about time leaping ever since he made the comment to Elsie about World 31. We also know that he claims to know about Mother and the chronophages. But notice in his comment to Nero that he says that Mother, the chronophages, and machines are all connected. So here's what I think happened. In another parallel universe, Ziggy was originally a good guy. At some point he meets Xenolith and learns gravity ether. But something happened that gave Ziggy a dark heart like Xenolith alluded to. Something that made him believe that machines could only live in peace if they wiped out humanity. So he found a way to control the chronophages and cause mass destruction throughout the universe. This part is likely hinted at when Ziggy talks about destroying the universe and completing the grand circle of fate. Because if Shiki is a reincarnated Ziggy, then Shiki destroying the universe would be a repeat of what Ziggy did in a parallel universe. Now, as far as how he would come up with this kind of plan, think back to what Xenolith said to Rebecca. He called her the girl captivated by gravity. In one of my previous videos, I argued that Rebecca got her powers from Mother, and that the time leap ability is something that exists as a check against the chronophages. Well, if this is something from Mother, then it probably existed in Ziggy's universe too. So here's what I think happened. I think there was a past incarnation of Rebecca that was in love with Ziggy, the past incarnation of Shiki, and that love is somewhat influenced by the power of gravity. So in Ziggy's universe, once he turned evil, he found a way to use the past Rebecca to manipulate the chronophages and find Mother. But in order to save Ziggy and the universe, the past Rebecca reset time and wished for a person that could stop Ziggy in the next universe. But in a desperate attempt to save his memories, Ziggy found some sort of way to restore the memories of his future self in the new universe. This would explain why our Ziggy doesn't remember how he was revived. It would explain the gaps in his memory and the change in his personality. And it would explain why he seems to know about Mother. It would also explain why Ziggy seems convinced that Shiki is a threat to the universe, and why Rebecca's fate seems to be intertwined with Shiki's. Now, of course, this doesn't perfectly explain everything, but it does answer most of our questions. Plus, we know Mashima likes to repurpose old story elements, and if you're a fan of Rave Master, this stuff with Rebecca and Shiki should sound just a little familiar. So, at least right now, this is why I think Ziggy is a past incarnation of Shiki, who will not stop until the Grand Circle of Fate is completed. And that's it for this discussion. Hopefully you enjoyed my takes on the many Ziggy theories. If you did, then make sure to let me know by liking the video. Also, make sure to comment with your thoughts on Ziggy down below. And if you'd like more Eden Zero and other manga discussions like this one, then make sure to subscribe and follow along with each week's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.